Now, I've got some general thoughts and I'm going to take questions, which I realise can be quite dangerous an occupation. But I'm going to take some questions, happy to take some questions. And I want to try and head off some of the more predominant questions that come my way. I would say anyone claiming asylum in the United Kingdom should expect to keep UK laws. People are not exempt from the laws of our land. The laws of our land are the laws of the land. Anyone claiming asylum in the United Kingdom and committing a serious crime should be dealt with by the law, and in almost all cases, because I couldn't bring myself to write 100% just in case there was a mitigating factor that I couldn't think about, in almost all cases should expect to be deported if found guilty. I can't really think of anywhere where I wouldn't say that if somebody has abused their asylum status to commit a very serious crime, and we have seen that in the news recently, that they shouldn't be deported afterwards. What about our own problems is one of the things that people say to me. What about the homeless that we have on our streets? The veterans that aren't in housing? For me, it's not an either or. We should be looking after the homeless and the people with our own problems. We should be putting them in hotels. Now, I know that that's a very simple way of looking at the homeless problem, and that some people, believe me, I know this to be true because I spend time speaking to some of the homeless people, have chosen to make themselves homeless, have been in accommodation and have walked out for various reasons. But I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a do both. Again, just to remind you, £313 billion is approximately the budget of the welfare budget per year in the United Kingdom. We spend 5.3 billion on housing asylum seekers and looking after them. Here's a big challenge. Culture, religion. How do we integrate that into society? And that is a big, big challenge, because not everybody that arrives here and claims asylum is a Christian. Some have no religion, some are follow Islam. And we know that can create tensions in communities. And so I don't have the best answer to that. I don't have a great answer to that. That is something probably brainier people than me and brainier people have got to find a way of how we deal with the cultural differences. One thing I would say, spoken to people from the asylum hotel, is that they acknowledge that some people that arrive in the UK do not understand the culture. But equally, they are not taught what the culture is. Perhaps we need to bring in some form of education to people that are arriving in these hotels and sit them down before they hit the street, so to speak, and say, look, these are some of the things that you may find very culturally different in the United Kingdom. And you see, we can't and shouldn't be campaigning to say that people can't have religious freedom in the UK. We are still just about allowed to go and proclaim the gospel in the town centre. We're allowed to shout about our faith. It should not be that we exclude other people being able to do that about theirs. They may be wrong, they are wrong. But if we want religious freedoms, we have to allow other people to at least have their religious freedom as well. So my key takeaways this morning, as I head towards answering some questions, if there are any, is how did Jesus treat people? Read the Gospels. Jesus treated people with compassion and respect and care. Ultimately, people that are responsible for him being nailed to the cross, but he treated them with care and respect. If you are a follower of Jesus here this morning, how has Jesus treated you? Heads up, he took the punishment you deserve. And it isn't about saying everybody can stay in the UK. That, I think, is a misconception that Christians, that I would say everybody can stay, everybody's welcome. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying everybody has the right to ask to stay. And then the laws of the land and decency and humanity kick in as to whether or not they can stay or not. That is where I sit on immigration. I believe that is a biblical answer to a biblical way of looking at it. But I'm happy to take questions. What we're going to do, we're going to leave the camera going for the questions. I would say that if they get heated, which not from my side, I'm going to be lovely and kind, then we may edit them out of the talk at the end. This video is obviously going to go online. We'll see where the questions go. We may separate them off. So we're not going to put your face on camera. I may say your first name when answering the question, but just be aware we are recording what is said. So I'm going to ask Brian to come and take this microphone, and I'll pick up the recorded one. And Brian will bring the phone? The microphone around. Brian's going to hold on to the microphone, so don't expect to be able to hold it. But if you've got a question, got something you want to pass a comment on, let's keep it respectful. Let's keep it as factual as we can. And Brian will come to you and I'll answer any questions that I can.
So I have a question.
Oh.
So we say we're all created in God's image and that we're all equal. And we should bear that in mind regarding immigration. Does that even apply to the Welsh?
Yes.
I've
already hit somebody with my flag this morning. Would you like to go and hit Brian with it? Because that was
very brave, Brian.
Okay, so has anybody got something they would like to comment, a question they would like to ask? Can you just, can I just ask you to speak into the mic, please?
I struggle as a mum, because it's the fear of the asylum seekers that are in hotels in our area that haven't been processed. What about the ones that have got criminal records or are at risk? You know, we as people in the community and our children could potentially be at risk. I'm not saying that we are, but we could potentially be, because these people haven't been processed. They're in our area and in our town. And it scares a lot out when you're 2 teenage daughters. And how does God look on that? I understand this side and half, but the fear that runs through me because of my children, it escalates the risk to me.
I can, and that's a common thing that comes up. And one thing I would say, and there are all kinds of stats out there that show that, let's say, men from a particular ethnicity may have a propensity to commit crime more than others, and so that's a figure that gets stated around about people coming in on the boats. My challenge to people when I'm talking to them in Cannock is, one, what is your account? Personally, have you experienced that in Cannock? Because I can only talk about what I see in Cannock, and generally they say no, I've heard of this happening. And if they do say yes, I say, have you reported it to the police? And when I spoke to a police sergeant the other week, and I said, can you answer the question, has there been an increase in complaints about things of asylum seekers committing crimes and causing distress in this area? And he got on the radio and asked somebody and said, no. He said, as far as we are aware, we have not had an increase in complaints. Now, that isn't to say that we should that fear isn't correct and it isn't a concern, because it is. The answer is to process people quicker. And we can talk about whether people should be put up in hotels or whether they should be detained in a kind of, I don't like using the word camp because that has quite a, can appear to be quite negative. But if there could be some kind of processing centre where people were treated with respect and kindness and fed and looked after, but the benefit of it would be that the process would be quicker, then I think that would be more palatable to me as a Christian, that people shouldn't necessarily be around in the community, but actually with the promise of being processed very quickly, unless there was a real problem with the processing, that they're detained and processed, then hopefully that would eliminate that. It is going to be, I would think, nearly impossible to vet people, because they say who they are. Some places don't have, countries don't have, I guess, criminal record systems like we do in the UK. So we're never going to eliminate that problem from people coming into the country, as equally as we're never going to eliminate it from people that are already here in the country. It is a challenge, and I am not saying that I am condoning in any sense any illegal activities that happen, and I understand the fear, and I have children, obviously mine are a bit older. It's interesting to me, the one time my daughter, and this was a few years ago, rang me concerned in Cannock Town Centre was because of a drunk Englishman. That was when she rang me, because the police have been called and he's been arrested. Now, I'm not saying that there haven't been problems with other ethnicities, but the one time in the 6 years that we've lived in Cannock, and she would be in the town centre, that she had a problem. It was with a drunk Englishman who was leering at girls and wolf whistling and asking them to do obscene things. So, genuine concern. I'm not saying it's not, and again, a challenge to solve.
I assume that the processing has to be dependent on the other country cooperating and communicating and, filling in that process. So that creates a challenge, doesn't it?
So, absolutely. Any other questions? Any other comments?
My question, I suppose, is more of a broader one than specifically about immigration. I don't want to give any impression that I'm eager for conflict or anything like that, but I am curious as to what parts of the Bible speak about being Christian and conflict, even as far as like a military kind of standing. I obviously know one of the commandments is thou shalt not kill. Obviously, I'm not looking or anyone or condone that people should be.
You've only been married 2 days, man. Come on.
I'm on about hell. Yeah. So it was just any sort of advice really on areas of the Bible, or your knowledge around conflicts really, and whether that's ever okay.
I think there's a difference between the instruction to not kill anyone, as in the sense of me waking up and saying I wanted to do Ruth in, or vice versa mainly, and the act of war. So I think that there is a significant difference. I think that yes, in an ideal world we wouldn't be at war, but if somebody invaded the United Kingdom, would I say the United Kingdom had the right to defend itself militarily? Yes. And if that involved people being killed, then I think that there is an allowance for that from a moralistic, biblical point of view. So we're not told just to kind of lay down and take that kind of aggression in that sense. Scripturally wise, I'd need to come back to you on that, because I just off the top of my head. And you can read parts of the Old Testament, and actually the Bible Project course that some people have been doing in the church touched on this a couple of weeks ago, about where we see God instruct the Israelites to behave in certain ways when invading countries. So it is a challenge, but I think there is a distinct difference between a time of war and a time of peace. Any other questions?
Kind of off the back of Kev's question, whether it's true or not, everything I've heard, a lot of what I've heard and what I've seen is that a lot of the immigrants that are coming over are men of fighting age from Islamic countries. We've had, historically, an issue with homegrown terrorism. Is that not a cause for concern?
Absolutely. It's a cause of concern. And I'm not saying that you're using these words. I do think that the words that people use to describe asylum seekers, to describe people coming over, is very interesting, because I think that some politicians and some people who are protesting, lead protesters, use that word fighting age to evoke that fear, to evoke that picture of these men coming across to commit, to take over the country. Hey, just recently a guy from Cannock has been found guilty of planning a terrorist attack against, I think, a mosque, just been sentenced in court. They raided his house, wasn't too far from where the old church was, and found an assortment of weapons, and he was collaborating with 3 people he'd met online to start a wave of terrorist attacks. Of course, it's definitely a concern that we may be bringing in people, or people may be coming with the wrong motives. That said, they're likely to try and sneak in anyway, if they wanted to do that from a different country. So again, it boils down to processing, to culture, to being aware. But I think we, as you rightly said, we have problems with homegrown terrorists of all different bents, so to speak. So yeah, I guess it is a challenge. It would be interesting to know, and I don't know the answer to this, is how many people that have come in through the asylum process have gone on to commit a terrorist attack in the UK. I would imagine that actually it's more people who have been radicalised who are born in the UK have gone on to commit in the name of Islam or whatever religion they're doing their attacks in, that they have been born in the UK and radicalised in the UK. And that then comes down to freedom of religion, doesn't it? And that's a challenge in itself. Go on, Phil.
Is this working?
Yeah.
I'm just going to slightly take you to task.
Okay, please do.
Yeah, just about
We might edit this bit,
yeah.
especially if you've got a good point.
Just about the finances.
Yep.
You say it's 5.1 billion.
5.3 was the figure I got off.
I don't dispute that. And then what you did that was put against the huge figure that social care delivers.
Yeah.
It is a huge and very necessary figure. But that makes that money dismissible, and that's, for me, completely wrong.
Okay.
The point is, if you take Staffordshire County Council, which handles all the social care, all the children's care, fostering, and many issues that manage in Staffordshire, and they manage that on probably less than $1 billion, about 800 million.
Yep.
So if you take that 5.1 billion that against the 800 million, suddenly that's a different world, because if you said to Staffordshire County Council, actually you can have another $1 billion, then our social care could be substantially better than it is currently in Staffordshire. Let me finish.
Yeah.
On top of that, you've got Cannock Chase Council, so I'm aware of all these budgets, run, I think, on about 15 million, Paul may correct that, 15 million, totaling 25 million if you take all sorts of other stuff. So that's 25. So you can't compare 5.1 billion to the huge budget without dismissing the amount that local authorities have to run their care services and their children's services on substantially less. Now, I'm not saying whether we should or shouldn't spend 5.1 billion. That's not my argument. The argument is primarily the way you deliver that, as though it was a dismissive amount of money, and actually it is a massive amount of money that would have a big impact if it wasn't spent where it's spent now. Now, I'm not arguing that it should or shouldn't be spent where it is. I'm arguing that I don't think I think he was dismissive of the point.
Okay. So, Phil, you may or may not know the answer to this question. How many local councils are there in the UK that have that budget of 800 million to do their social care or whatever it is?
I'm sorry, I can't. It's every council.
Okay.
But
so that 5.3 billion pounds would need to be divided across all of those councils to make that, the way you've described that figure, correct. Because it's not about giving 5.3. That wasn't 5.3 billion. That's just for this area. That was for the whole of the United Kingdom.
Oh, I'm aware of that.
So it may make a difference of, and I'm not wanting to dismiss it, but it may make a difference of £10 million or £100 million, depending on how many councils that figure has to be divided across to do. So what I'm trying to say is I do think that relative to the overall budget, relative to the overall spending of governments, it shouldn't be a figure that scares us in that sense, because it is, within the great scheme of things, you know, a smaller percentage of what we would spend. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be funding those local services better, but I'm just thinking that when you look at the 5.3 billion as a percentage of everything, and then yes, we could divide it down across all of the local councils and we could be better spending it there potentially. I just think that the difference that it would make, or is, I'm just not sure how much it would be. I'd be interested to know, and I'd be interested how much more money, if we didn't have to spend the 5.3 billion on asylum claims, how much more money would Staffordshire County Council have? How much would that?
But it's not necessarily divided by every. It would be where there's a need. So, for instance, in the UK, we have a massive housing crisis. 5.1 billion would buy a huge amount of houses, so, which would alleviate our housing crisis. So you can't just say, oh, we're just going to divide that and then it'll work out a tenner a piece. I think what you can do is that's 5.1 billion pounds where it would have an impact. To say, I'm not arguing the point that we shouldn't spend it. I'm more arguing the point that you can't be dismissive.
And if I appeared to be dismissive, not necessarily what I meant. It was more the percentage of the budget, but fair point. Maybe dismissive was how it came across. So if that's the case, that's not exactly how I meant it. Any other questions?
Yeah, what about support?
Okay, so it seems that the seekers that we had with us have disappeared.
Yeah.
And this is because two of them, gained employment.
One of them's gained employment. One of them has been moved area. Well, two of the asylum seekers that have been here have received right to stay in the UK. Have had their application processed and have been given the right to stay in the UK for initially 5 years. And so they're now able to work, and they've had to move out of the hotel, and they have gone off and found somewhere to live and to work to support themselves, hopefully, in that process. The third asylum seeker that we've had here regularly is still having their application process, but they were moved out of the hotel to Birmingham, to a HMO. So hence they go to a church in Birmingham.
Yeah, he was travelling there from...
Yeah, he was travelling from Birmingham,
yeah. So obviously, somewhere along the line, did they get the offer of employment first before they were given the right to stay?
No, they're not allowed to. They're not allowed to apply to work in the UK or work in the UK until they have their asylum status clarified. So if they weren't able to get work, they would be entitled to the same benefits that anybody in the United Kingdom would be entitled to while they look for work. However, my belief is that most of the guys that we've met want to work, so it's just a matter of them finding work when they come in.
They would all love to work so that they can stay here.
Yeah.
The question still in my mind is, the time scale seems pretty short that they get employment very soon after where people, our own country people, can't get employment.
Hooray! So well said, Tony.
So
it just seems to me that there seems to be a little bit of organisation going on the side of the asylum seekers.
Yeah, I don't know that for certain. I know that there are a number of job vacancies. I don't know why. I think it's a very nuanced question as to why people can and can't get jobs. So I'm not in a position to answer that. In all fairness, I don't know if there's whether it's just that they're willing to do jobs that other people don't want to do, or they've got skills that come from abroad that make them more suitable for their jobs. I don't know the answer to that.
One went to work for a window company that manufactures windows.
So one of the guys was a window fitter, one of the guys was a goldsmith. So, you know, they've got some skills there that may or may not be prevalent in the UK. We're beginning to run out of time, but I'm happy to answer any other questions that we may have. Okay. Well, I thank you for the questions. I thank you for, I don't think I fell out with you. Did I fall out with you? No, that's slight. There we go. Might have fallen out with Amy, but that's all right. I'll sweet talk Amy
That's
afterwards.
my job.
I'm happy to take questions afterwards, and if anybody's got anything they want to email in, if you vehemently disagree with me, come and talk to me. I'm happy to do that. We are running really late, so I'm actually not going to finish with the worship song because it's 12 o'clock, and we need to get Kingdom Kids sorted out. So I'm going to pray, and then we'll have refreshments and go from there. So Lord, thank you for this morning. Thank you for our honest and frank conversations. Lord, and I just pray right now that, Lord, wherever, if I've represented it wrong, Lord, you will correct that. Lord, wherever we need changes of hearts on whatever side, you will change that. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Have a great rest of your Sunday. Please collect your kids from Kingdom Kids.